Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Sharmin. Today I'm gonna teach you autoimmune disease and a case of mistaken identity. Okay, so let's get started. Not only does the body mount immune responses against pathogens and harmful substances and from outside the body, but it also attack itself, bleeding, and in some cases to several symptoms. Diseases of this type are diseases of this type are autoimmune disease. They occur because the immune system attacks one or more self-antigens, usually proteins. Okay, and during the maturations of T cells in the thymus, many millions of cells are destroyed because they have T cell receptors that are complementary to self-antigens. However, some of these T cells evade destruction and under certain circumstances are activated to stimulate an immune response against the body's own proteins. So these start an attack often involving antibodies and killer T cells against parts of the body. In some autoimmune disease, the attack is localized and destroyed against one organ. In others, it's directed against the whole body. Myasthenia gravis, which means grave muscle weakness, is an autoimmune disease that targets the neuromuscular junctions between motor neurons and skeletal muscle cells, and motor neurons transmit nerve impulses to muscle cells. Where the motor neurons terminate, they release acetylcholine as cell signaling molecules into the small gap between neurons and muscle fibers. Okay, so acetylcholine binds with receptor proteins on cell surface membranes of the muscle fibers. The interaction of acetylcholine and its receptor stimulates channels to open, allowing sodium ions to move through the membranes. The influx of sodium begins a series of events that result in muscle contraction. Okay, so people with myasthenia gravis have helper T cells that specific for these cell surface receptors for acetylcholine. Under certain conditions, these cells stimulate a clone of B cells to differentiate into plasma cells and secrete antibodies that bind to the receptor, so blocking the transmission of impulses for motor neurons. And muscle fibers absorb the receptor antibodies complexes and destroy them. And without acetylcholine receptors, muscle cells don't receive any stimulation, and because the muscles are not stimulated, muscle tissue starts to break down. So the symptoms of myasthenia gravis vary greatly between people with these autoimmune disease. So this typical symptom is muscles weakness that gets worse with activity and improves with rest. So affected muscles become fatigued very easily. This means that symptoms are usually worse at the end of the day or after exercise. So there are effective treatment for myasthenia gravis, such as drug that inhibits the enzyme in synapses that break down acetylcholine. The effect of this drug is to increase the concentration of acetylcholine in synapses, so its action in stimulating muscle fibers to contact last for longer. Okay, so and surgical removal of thymus gland. Surgical removal of thymus gland is also an effective treatment, possibly because it's the site maturations of the helper T cells that stimulate B cells to produce antibodies to the acetylcholine receptors. So other autoimmune diseases include multiple sclerosis, so rheumatoid arthritis, rheumatoid arthritis are one form of diabetes, and multiple sclerosis develops when nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord lose the insulating myelin cells that surround them, and this can happen anywhere in the central nervous system and appears to be quite random. The degenerating areas known as plaques can be detected using MRI scans. So with the loss of the protective myelin, the neurons stop conducting impulses and there is a loss of functions controlled by the areas of CNS, that means central nervous system concerned, okay? And symptoms are muscles weakness, loss of sensory input to the skin and other areas, poor vision, and mental problems, okay? So yeah, rheumatoid arthritis is another long-term destructive process, this time occurring in the joints. And this time occurring in the joints, it starts with the fingers and hand joints and then spreads to the shoulders and other joints, okay? So tendons become inflamed and there is constant muscle spasm and pain. So people with rheumatoid arthritis find it hard to keep mobile. So type 1 insulin dependent diabetes is thought to be caused partly by a virus infection that makes the cells that secrete insulin in the pancreas unrecognizable as self. So killer T cells enter the islets of Langerhans and destroy the cells that produce insulin. So the cause of autoimmune disease are not well known and are the subject of much research. Although myasthenia gravis often runs in the families, it's not an inherited condition. So, however, people with certain alleles of genes involved in cell recognition are at a higher risk of developing myasthenia gravis than those without these alleles. So yeah, so genetic factors are involved as it has been shown that susceptibility to the disease is inherited. However, environmental factors are also very important as the increase in prevalence of this disease in the developed world over the last 50 years. I'll suggest, okay? So also people who have moved from an area, also people who have moved from an area where these diseases are rare, such as Japan, and to places where they are more common, such as the United States, and have an increased chance of developing one of these diseases. So guys, that's all. Thank you for watching.